If you have a Sargon pillow, I'm not answering your question.
Testing, testing.
I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm
There
joking.
y'all,
Test.
y'all go around.
Hello, 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 hello. Mic working?
Okay. Just like say your name, I guess your question.
Do I get
You don't have to
my
speak.
pronouns?
Yeah, and your pronouns.
Hi, Sargon and Hunter.
Hey, man.
I wanted to tell you I've been watching you since Gamergate, so hundreds of hours spent, and anyways, loved your content.
It's always nice to meet a veteran.
Yeah, yeah, I survived the war.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you too, General. So I was told to give my pronouns. I identify as an attack helicopter, if that's relevant. Anyway, I've personally been censored both in real life by my professor who cut me off. She had pre-approved the topic ahead of time and then didn't like the direction I took it, and been also asked to remove tweets. With platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and even Pinterest censoring content they deem objectionable, which is anything to the right of like Noam Chomsky, do you see them ever truly upholding free speech, aside from the usual caveats of direct calls for violence, slander, etc.? I mean, mostly conservatives, but also some Democrats, like even one of our candidates, Tulsi Gabbard, have really kind of had it with being told by woke skulls in Silicon Valley that you can't say this and you can't think that. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
I think that they don't really care. They've got no particular financial investment in political content, believe it or not. It makes up, I mean, YouTube gets something, what was it, 2 billion unique users a month. A tiny fraction of the hundreds of millions of views on YouTube are actually political content. This is something that Susan Wojcicki was talking about recently. Honestly, I think eventually they'll probably say, screw it. They'll just yeet political content off YouTube because it's a lot of hassle for them. It really is, and they get it awfully in the neck because the people that are most vocal about it are the people closest to them. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that the owners of the tech giants, Tim Cook aside, who sounds these days like a preacher, are not actually that ideological in and of themselves. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg gave a speech at Georgetown University the other day that was surprisingly pro-free speech. And I think that he probably does genuinely believe it, but you've got to understand the people around them are often not, and especially because it's, you know, they're based in San Francisco. So all of the individuals, you know, or the overwhelming majority of the individuals manning the infrastructure that lays under him, they're all going to be very politically one-sided, and they're going to be putting pressure on him. And I mean, it's honestly something I'm not particularly optimistic about. But I mean, maybe you're more optimistic.
Could you repeat the question? I thought that was a question for Sargon.
It was, but you might have one.
I can give you the TLDR. Basically, everyone and their grandmother censoring things. Do you think that they're ever going to be like, maybe I should follow the general freedom of speech, except for, you know, slander, actual calls to violence and stuff?
Well, I do think that kind of like what I talked about in my speech, I think that a lot of the times it's easy to label these instances as censorship when it really comes down to the company lacking transparency. I don't really agree with the whole censorship thing, mostly because YouTube does have a financial incentive to host political content. I know that it might be a fraction of all the content in the grand scheme of things, but I know that YouTube is, I mean, it's a growing platform for the right wing. And so I think that at the end of the day, I think that they're allowed to withhold whichever community guidelines they choose. They don't operate based on freedom of speech, even though that'd be really nice if they did. So I guess only time will tell. But I don't think that we're moving in the direction of every conservative channel getting deleted off the internet. No.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Honker the Clown. You might recognize me from such events as the Straight Pride Parade in Boston, Massachusetts. Behind me, this is the very pillow that you shout out in your channel, actually. It is the one and the same. And I'd like to personally invite you to join us next year in 2020. But my question involves, I have a little bit of a parallel to draw and then a question about it. So here in America, we have what's called Trump derangement syndrome, right? Where these crazy leftists, you know, are just that. They legitimately go insane over Trump's Twitter account, let's say. And I'm witnessing a similar phenomenon, I feel, in the UK about Brexit, Brexit derangement syndrome, if you will. And I've listened at length you talk on your channel about people who have taken this spiral down, going insane over Brexit. And the question I have for you is, what do you do in your own personal life to keep yourself from getting to that point of just like Brexit just overtaking your mind and going absolutely insane?
I am absolutely sick of talking about Brexit. I really wish they'd just do it. I mean, it's quite a scary position, but the whole issue of derangement syndrome is a very interesting one, because I bet nobody remembers the libertarian protests against Barack Obama, do they? But man, that was some Barack Obama derangement syndrome. They were just calling him a communist. Now, you don't have to like Barack Obama to know that he's not a communist. He's just a center leftist, really. But these protests were every bit the Trump derangement syndrome. And I think what it comes down to is when there's a fundamental breach of principle in what's going on. They just could not stand the government intervention that Obama wanted, in the same way that the leftists now cannot stand the fact that Trump is not going to apologize for the mean things he said. And when you get to this sort of point, you've either got to accept it or flip out. And there'll probably come a time where you guys are having some sort of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez derangement syndrome when she's the president and she's bringing in communism.
Don't say that.
I agree.
It's already happening.
I don't want that either, but the fact that you all reacted like that is exactly my point, right? That's just exactly what I mean. I agree. I don't want her to be president either, but this is something that we're going to have to figure out. And I'm not saying I've got the answers either, but this is not an individual, a one-sided issue. This is an issue that affects everyone. And as things become more polarized and each ideology is pushed towards its more extreme points, I think we're going to see it more and more. And honestly, I think it's really concerning.
I would agree. Thank you.
And so does the baby.
Adorable, by the way.
So a big problem that we have with the left right now is just a ton of hypocrisy. There's basically no statute of limitations for how you've sinned in the eyes of the left. However, a lot of what we've been dealing with lately is just stuff the left did like 15 years ago. We've noticed it with Trudeau and blackface. It's come to light recently with Biden and political lynching, and trust me, there are a lot more people who use political lynching. But the thing is, heck, even the 2016 election was mostly just a new programmed Hillary versus half the things she said 15 years ago. That was half of Trump's platform. But there's all this hypocrisy, and it's still coming to light just how much more there is. Yet people are still ignoring it. Is there a way we can just kind of hammer down on that point for the left's integrity?
I wouldn't bank on leftist integrity, frankly. I mean, I think it's entirely to Hunter's credit and the credit of conservatives for not simply booing him when he said, look, I think this is overblown. I mean, I disagree. I think that we've got a point of contention here, but the fact that you guys, he made the point that you guys listened and applauded is genuinely impressive, because I bet if this was a democratic gathering and someone got up and said, right, okay, look, I think maybe the claims of racism have been overblown, they'd get probably, well, lynched on the stage. So I don't think that they care. They've got a kind of messianic goal in mind, and they're so close to it. They just need to censor a few more people to get there. So I would stop wasting your time, because the thing is, at the end of the day, an allegation of hypocrisy is really just an ad hominem. It's just saying you are the problem. You're not addressing anyone's points. You know, you're saying, oh, we used to do this. So what? They don't care. They hate you. They'd put you in a gulag if they could. You know, they're not going to sit there and go, oh, God, I'm so ashamed. You know, the people outside are absolutely shameless. The unbelievable lies that they say about someone. Imagine writing a screed about someone that is just entirely negative, right? That's the sort of thing you do to Hitler. That's the sort of thing you do to Stalin. You don't sit there and go, well, actually, I mean, he was a vegan who cared for animals, so, you know, maybe he wasn't all that bad. And that's how they consider us. So, you know, don't sit there worrying about that. You've got to speak to the regular person who doesn't really know what's going on and say, look, you know, I think these people are really far out. I'm not like that, and I'm willing to have a reasonable dialogue.
So just wanted to say, Hunter, this is the first time I've ever heard of you was me showing up tonight, and I actually very appreciated your message, even if I don't fully agree with it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Sargon, love you, but also fuck you, I love you, but you know how it is. So I guess the main question that I have is, I'm a huge gamer, kind of rotund at this point too. So the big question that I have is, what is your stance on the actions that Blizzard has taken over the, I forget the guy's name now, pressure of being up here. Blitz, what he said.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to know your opinions on that and how you think we could move forward in trying to pressure companies to support more, I guess, moral causes.
Honestly, I think the problem is pressuring companies to support moral causes. I mean, have we not had enough of that yet? The whole point of capitalism is that the market is anonymous and it is neutral. You know, you're not supposed to really know who you're dealing with. You don't want your companies to become ethical companies. I mean, this is the problem that we have with socialism and fascism. They've got an ethical agenda and they want to enforce it on you. It's the same thing the Chinese do. That's the reason that so many companies are currently, we're going to censor any talk of China. We're not going to have any of this, because the Chinese have an ethical agenda. It's a different one to your ethical agenda, obviously. But the thing that we should be asking for is neutrality. And to be honest with you, the guy did go up and say, well, I support a political cause. And that was actually in the rules that he wasn't allowed to make a political statement there. So I can't actually criticize Blizzard that much. Now, I'm not particularly up on the Blizzard issue because I haven't really been following that much. But but the thing is, then you come to the counter argument of, well, if they're doing it, what are we going to do? Stand here defenseless? Good point. You know, I can't say that you should just stand there and let them do it. I'm totally in support of the Hong Kong protesters. I think China at this point is a fascist state, and we should be doing everything we can in the same way of Saudi Arabia, just everything we can to stop interacting with them. You know, I would rather have someone else manufacturing our goods. I'd rather that manufacturing come back home, you know, but at the end of the day, we're stuck. We're stuck between lots of bad decisions, and we're going to have to just make those rough ones as they come, man.
Hello. I apologize. I would like to ask a Brexit question. We don't get that opportunity much in central Pennsylvania. So if the UK were to actually leave the customs union, it would necessitate some level of border checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which would violate the Good Friday Accords. And I'm honestly curious, why is Brexit more important than the Good Friday Accords, in the opinion of the Liberals?
So what he's suggesting is that it'll return to the period of time in Britain called the Troubles, where there was a huge amount of Irish nationalist terrorism. Ironically, this is actually ethno-nationalist terrorism that we're talking about, but nobody ever wants to frame it that way. I don't think that the Irish have a just cause here at all, because in 1922, the Irish voted to leave the British Empire. They created the Irish Free State. But Northern Ireland voted to remain. They didn't want to leave. So I think that the IRA is a terrorist organization with no just cause. But what Boris Johnson had managed to do is actually negotiate quite a sensible compromise. If it would be a hypothetical border, but what it would be is custom checks, not on a border, but at depot points, and using various electronic tagging mechanisms and things like that. So it actually quite slyly circumvented that. So I don't think that it will actually violate the Good Friday Agreement. And one of the authors of the Good Friday Agreement actually said that he was happy with Boris's arrangement. So I'm quite happy with that. But speaking to the why is it more important, honestly, because we voted for it. And if our votes don't matter because of some prior commitment, then why would we vote in the future?
Thank you.
Hi, so I just want to say, first of all, huge fan. And my question is, do you believe that so-called anti-Semitic speech, such as the boycott, divest, sanction movement, should also be protected as free speech?
Yeah, any kind of speech that isn't directly inciting violence should be protected as free speech.
Can I clarify? Because I believe it is illegal in the United States to support the BDS movement if you have a government contract, is why I felt that was an important question.
Yeah, but that might be a separate concern, because I mean, like, for example, if you want your institutions to remain neutral, then you probably shouldn't have institutions that are where you have people openly parroting political opinions. I mean, this is one of the problems that we currently have with, I mean, like in your university, I bet if you were to check the faculty's Twitter pages, I bet they're pretty leftist, aren't they? So, and that's really not the kind of thing you want. I mean, this is like in your armed forces. They're not allowed. A guy got in trouble for wearing a Kekistan patch, and he was right to be in trouble for it because it is a political message, you know? So if you're supposed to be apolitical, you're not allowed to do that. So, I mean, technically it is a free speech concern, but there are going to be times if you're working in an institution where you probably shouldn't be voicing political concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, so I'm a Gamergate veteran as well, so I wanted to thank you for that. You know, I knew a lot of good frogs who never came back, so gamers rise up, gamers rise up. So
honestly, that's the best thing I've heard so far.
So honestly, Sargon, I didn't know much about you before today, and you kind of have a little bit of a reputation as somewhat of a goofball online, but
Sure.
I was pleasantly surprised by what you said, and I found myself agreeing with a lot of it. So yeah, but my question was, so I actually do believe somewhat in having ethical causes and in including that in political action. I think that as a political movement, we also have a responsibility to build up the social foundation for that political superstructure. I think we need to be promoting vitalism and community and family and all of those things as well. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the separation between state and society is that society is effectively left to run its own devices. And so, I mean, this is so frustrating hearing Americans talk about things like pan-Europeanism and stuff like that. We're a European country. No, you're an English country. Right? No, you absolutely are, which is why you have a constitution, right? The Germans didn't create a constitution. The French had an absolute monarch when we had a Bill of Rights. You're an English country. These countries are where tyranny comes from, right? And these countries didn't create the separation between the state and society. It was the yeoman with his longbow that created that, and that's why you have your Second Amendment. Okay? You are not French or German countries, and I really wish you'd understand that, because the whole point is the English are what are known as a clubbable society, right? They form clubs, they form groups, they go out and do the things that they want to do, and that's exactly what you're suggesting. And I totally agree, that's exactly what you should be doing, because it's these structures that build a kind of social power base away from government intervention. And that's actually a check on tyranny. So yeah, you definitely should do that. And the more that they try to isolate you and atomize you from these things, the weaker you become and the stronger they become. And you want a strong society to prevent a big tyrannical government. This is the only way to do it.
Thank you. First off, I watch your videos a lot, Sargon. I really appreciate your content. Hunter, I haven't heard of you before, but I will definitely check you out. Sorry, no offense.
Subscribe.
Yeah, you're getting lots of new subscribers here, don't you?
So I wanted to ask a question because earlier you said that The Economist, I believe it was, found that there is no Google search algorithmic bias against conservatives, but All Sides, which is a nonpartisan organization, found that it does indeed censor or at least filter to the extent of about 65% of political related search results are left-leaning and about half of the others are center. And not only does it have the left-leaning filter, but it also has a corporate filter, which means all of the corporate news like CNN, but also Fox News gets rated significantly above independent producers like yourself, which is what I prefer to watch. And an example of this, like YouTube, whenever I searched up Ukraine, I would have to dig through 80 or 90 videos before I would find one by, say, Tim Pool that had 300,000 views, and I would be scrolling past videos with 3,000 views from CBS News. Furthermore, like Google, when I Googled Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton pictures, the first image that popped up was a picture of 20 years ago of Donald Trump with Epstein, and they pushed all of the Bill Clinton ones to the bottom. So would you say that there is no bias against conservatives with respect to the algorithms, even though the executives themselves have espoused that they believe that it is their moral obligation to stop Trump in 2020?
Well, I would really like to see more about this study. I have not heard of the study. The one I was brought up from The Economist talks about, it actually went into what you mentioned on how certified syndicated news companies are put at the top of search results. I would have to see the study to give you a better answer. Again, I certainly think that bias can motivate decisions that'll negatively impact conservative content creators, but I don't think it's at the level that many make it out to seem. I don't think that it's a big conspiracy against all the conservatives to drown out their content. Kind of like, Sargon, you brought up earlier what Steven Crowder mentioned about the channel not coming up. The same thing was happening with my channel too at the time, and then like 3 days later it was back up, and everyone's channel now comes up with their latest.
Yeah, but
content.
that's because Steven Crowder actually got YouTube to change the way that it displays. It displays the top 2 videos, the latest 2 videos that come up because of Steven Crowder's evidence that they're actually censoring these things. I mean,
So they changed it because Steven Crowder
Yes.
complained about it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've complained about it before, and then it got fixed, and then it changed, and then it got fixed again. So if it's some kind of a censorship, it doesn't seem like it's.
I think it's more that it's
that
very
impactful.
subtle. I mean, I don't know if anyone saw the Robert Epstein congressional testimony. He's a friend of Hillary Clinton, and he went to Congress and said, look, I'm here because I believe that Google is actually actively interfering in the democratic process. And by his estimation, by his calculations, funneled 2.5 million votes to Hillary just on the inherent bias of the algorithm itself. Because it's not necessarily that they're sat there going, right, Hunter Avallone censored, Sargon censored. But what it is, the way that it works is in line with leftist ideology. And so, like with Twitter banning people for misgendering, that's entirely political. There's no other way of looking at that because everyone else doesn't care about it. But the left say, well, everything's political, the person is political, and therefore you misgendering me is political, and people can lose their accounts over it. So I'm not saying that your data is wrong, because it's obviously not. There is a huge conservative presence on social media, but where else are you guys going to go? And that was the thing. There was the Google thing where they said we're going to stop. Who was it at Google? It was a really high up guy giving a talk.
Wasn't that during like a conference where they were
Yeah.
like talking and
Yeah.
venting their grievances about Trump?
Post-election, I believe there was a video, but there was also, I believe, a female Google executive. I'm not sure exactly what her title was, but she literally came out and said
The
that they are
Project Veritas
trying
one.
to affect the election.
Was it the Project Veritas?
I know that.
believe
Well,
so.
maybe again, you are bringing up some things that I honestly have not
Yeah.
seen. As far as the Google meeting where they were all talking, I have heard about that, and where they were kind of airing their grievances against Trump. I don't deny that the people running Google are complete libcocks, right? Like everyone kind of knows this, but even if you look at that one instance where they were talking about not liking Donald Trump or whatever, it was shown later that wasn't a discussion around the algorithm. That wasn't a discussion around how they're operating the site. It was actually just a company meeting where they were just able to sort of air their grievances, which I think is important for companies to encourage their employees to be open about their politics as well. Again, I think it's more of a nuanced discussion. I don't think that it's as deliberate as many make it out to seem.
Okay. Also, you talked about because it's not the state, it's not necessarily protected by the First Amendment, which is a common thing that I hear from very libertarian people that say, oh, it's a private company, they can do what they want. However, as libertarian as I might be on a number of issues myself, do you not have to acknowledge the fact that when you have these tech giants like Google, Google is essentially a monopoly, and they're not just search results, but like they are YouTube. They're putting out self-driving cars. They are a massive entity, and now they've merged into Alphabet. So when these tech giants like Google, Facebook, Twitter, they have 90% of their market cornered or more, do you think that they should be held to a higher standard than just say like your local mom and pop's like grocery store in terms of behavior?
Certainly, Google is a huge, they control so much information that we all see. So I certainly think they should be held to a higher standard. And again, I do think that Google has a bias that can sometimes affect how information is portrayed. So yes, I think that they should be held to a higher standard. I just don't know if it's necessary, if we necessarily want the government to be the one holding that company to a higher standard.
Yeah, who else is going to do it though, man?
We can continue putting pressure on the company the way we have when they screw up. I just think that there's not a lot of the stuff you brought up earlier, kind of to support the claims of censorship, they weren't really very convincing, especially to say that like people are protesting us outside. That I don't think that's any proof of censorship. Like Planned Parenthood
They
gets
didn't
censored
because Donald Trump threatened to pull the funding of the university.
but that wasn't. Penn State issued a statement today. Did you read the statement?
I did.
Support free speech. They support ours coming.
They said they were forced to support free speech, and they
did not
denounced
say
us
that.
in categoric
They
terms.
did, you're right. They did denounce us,
Yeah.
but they said that they support free speech. I'm not saying we forced them to.
I do think you're being too optimistic, to be honest, because I think that had Donald Trump not leveled this threat on Twitter, then they would have pulled us. I don't think we'd be here without that. You know, I mean, honestly, I think you're way more optimistic than me on this.
I might be more optimistic. I just think that a lot of the evidence that you have invoked to support censorship isn't very convincing.
Well, I mean, I got
say that we're being-
deplatformed from 2 universities before coming to this one.
Right. I mean, and that would be a problem with the university, but this isn't big tech censorship.
No,
which
no,
is
I
more
didn't
what
say.
was specifically.
Yeah,
focused
yeah,
on.
absolutely.
Again, and I want to make it clear that like I'm not saying conservatives are never censored. I think that there is certainly censorship that goes on as far as on college campuses for conservatives. That's why I tried to make sure that my speech made it very clear that I was referring to big tech censorship alone. So again, I want to make it clear that I don't think that conservatives are never censored in any sphere. But as far as big tech goes, I just don't see it. I see a huge conservative online presence, and I see massive like there was a recent LGBT lawsuit against. I'm sure you've heard about it. I did like a couple videos on it because it was so ridiculous. But there's a big LGBT lawsuit. People suing YouTube, and actually in that lawsuit, they're claiming YouTube is promoting content that's anti-LGBT or that's against them. Because I don't know if you guys have heard of the channel Queer Kids Stuff. It's kind of a smaller channel, but right. I've done a lot of videos on that channel just debunking that woman's ludicrous claims, and so I have reason to believe that part of this lawsuit it does have something to do with my repeated content I made on her, but. So I mean, you kind of have it from all different sides. Conservatives claim we're being censored, but then on the flip side, a bunch of trans people are claiming, oh, no, we're being censored or we're being discriminated against because YouTube is promoting and profiting off videos that are anti-LGBT.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a legitimate claim. But I think Steven Crowder having his entire channel demonetized is a legitimate claim.
Well, Steven Crowder didn't violate the community guidelines to get his channel deleted, but he did violate the guidelines when it comes to the monetization policy. Also, when he got his monetization stripped away, he did not have his livelihood stripped. The guy, he's making millions of dollars. I mean, he's signed with the Blaze TV.
Sure, but I mean, YouTube came out and said that he did nothing wrong, and they
He did nothing wrong to warrant being deleted, but he did violate their policy when it came to monetization because he was selling a shirt that said "fag" on it, and which I think it's funny. I think it's funny.
Yeah, and that was after saying that they weren't going to take action.
Right, and I think that. Right. Well, I mean, in all fairness, YouTube may have gone out of their way to find something that they could kind of label as him not following the guidelines as far as for the monetization policy. But you can. Well, who's saying they don't do that to the leftist channels either? I've seen leftist channels that are completely fully demonetized. Who? Name the channel that's completely demonetized? Oh, yeah, there's a channel called Vosh. He actually went into his channel and showed how all of his videos are yellow, are demonetized. Again, it's not as cut and dry as a lot of people make it out to be.
Hi, Sargon. Hi, Hunter. Love your guys' content. I watch you guys all the time whenever you guys upload, and I do get the notifications, so that's good at least.
Good.
That's good
There you
news.
go.
But before my question here, I just want to say that Becca Lewis doesn't know what she's talking about at all because I watch you guys, Styx, Tim Pool, pretty much everybody on that list, and I don't have any slight inkling of oppressing any Jew or minority or anything like that. So that's a good thing. But what I want to say is, because the ramping up of censorship going on here, people who are starting out wanting to be content creators, there's so much pressure against actually trying to get into this. Do you guys think that this is going to create like a content creator gap to where, I mean, I know you guys aren't going to be doing this forever and ever and ever. You guys, your lives are going to change. You're going to go on to do different things. But do you think that it'll create a content gap, and if that's, and what ramifications that might cause?
I don't know. I think that the ease of access to the platform means that there's never going to be a shortage of people who are trying to create content. If anything, it'll just become an excessively crowded market, which will be frustrating for people who want to start, but what can you do?
I honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that there's always going to be a flow of content creators as long as the platform is easy access.
Howdy, guys. In regards, it's not necessarily towards censorship, but with your recent discussions on Twitter about the value of the family and how that's basically the secular goal of life, and you raising a family as well.
Oh, I see you found my secret Twitter account.
Yep. How do you deal? How would you deal with the scientifically proven destructive drug that is pornography, especially within regards of destroying the family?
Go ahead, man.
Porn is degenerate. Let me just say that right now. Stay away from the pornography, guys. You know what? If I could be super open with you guys, who hasn't looked at porn, right? Of course, I've had my fair share of times on porn. However, I will say,
That's the
Porn
only real
is-
porn anyway.
porn absolutely is degenerate. There are ways that it does screw with your brain, and I can tell, I know it's anecdotal to bring in my own personal experience, but just with my own personal experience, I have dealt with OCD, anxiety, and such in the past, and pornography is no friend to that predisposition where you already have a lot of, negative, intrusive thoughts and so forth. So yeah, I would definitely say that porn is destructive. Sorry to cut you off there.
Oh, no, not at all. I think that's a great point. It's like all things, I think, everything in moderation, really. But the problem with the internet is it's awash with free porn, and it's the hardest core porn you could ever think of. I mean, when I was your age, sounding like a grandfather here, but seriously, a little bit younger than you say, we didn't have the internet. When we were like 15, we didn't have the internet. So we didn't have access to this. Now you've got all this stuff on your phone, and there's no question of the fact that there is something called porn addiction, and that it does destroy the lives of young men. There's no question of it. The thing that you have to do is be a responsible parent. You can't really get the internet pulled down. That's always going to be there, and there's always going to be a way of finding that. I mean, for example, my son is literally never going to get a smartphone. He's going to have to leave my house before he gets on the internet, and his friends will say, well, that's unfair, and he'll say yes, and I'll say tough. So.
Hi, guys. I'm the dreaded MRA in the audience. So I was actually wondering, I've seen a couple of cases in the United States, specifically for circumcision and for the draft, where basically because they don't want to give men the potential right of bodily autonomy and not having to serve in order to get your vote, they've actually attempted to extend that right or that infringement upon that right to women. And there's actually a case presently that might actually allow female circumcision in the United States, as well as draft of women in the United States, because it's been deemed unconstitutional.
How progressive.
Yeah, so I was wondering what you guys think about that.
I'm afraid I'm not aware of that, so I can't speak to it.
Yeah, circumcision is a question that I've been asked about before. I'm sorry, man. I haven't done a lot of research into the subject, so I don't think I could really give you a very good answer.
I'd say, as someone not from America, though, it's so weird that so many people here are circumcised, and you hear the arguments for it. It's like, oh, it's good.
Circumcised gang.
Yeah, but it's weird. It's like, I don't know why you're applauding. Is that something worthy of applause?
No.
Yes.
Really? Why?
I'm kidding. I'm
like,
really
seriously,
just giving
it's such a strange thing, because most other countries don't do that. That's the sort of thing that Islamic fundamentalists do. That's the sort of thing that Jewish fundamentalists do. It's a weird thing, and the medical arguments for it are nonsense, absolute nonsense. But like I said, I'm no expert on that. I don't really know where you're going. So
I was mostly asking about the idea that it's actually, instead of granting the rights to the men. They actually are just trying to extend the infringement to women. I'm asking,
Yeah,
like,
I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's not a good idea at all. Also, I mean, just not to get all detailed or whatever, but like it's a lot different when it comes to a woman versus a man also. So I think that would be very dangerous.
Thank you.
Have I met you before?
Many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never forget a face, man.
I know you don't. Sargon Hunter, wonderful to see you. Hunter, I first saw you at the Minds IRL event, and great event. And I kind of wanted to push back about some of the stuff that you said and kind of pit and something Sargon has said in the past. Edginess. I love edgy humor. I think that a lot of people forget that less than 15 years ago, it was edgy to be pro-LGBT rights. Less than 70 years ago, it was, edgy to be pro-interracial marriage. And, the edginess as
just ask Hillary Clinton, right?
I mean, apparently it's not edgy to be, wear blackface in Canada anymore. So, but
need that Obama endorsement, man.
Yeah. But my problem is, I think that line where we see, the content is edgy, something isn't acceptable now, 20 years from now will be. And so what I have an issue with is when you say that conservatives aren't being censored or like liberals aren't being censored. I agree that it's not just conservatives, it's, self-described liberals, anyone who's anti-establishment. But my issue is, how can you say that just conform to the terms of service of a multinational corporation, conform to the terms of service, and then they move that line. And then all of a sudden it's edgy to talk about circumcision. It's edgy to talk about Sargon. It's edgy to talk about Hunter. And that in and of itself is enough to get you demonetized. So at what point do you push back and you say no? And how exactly are you going to push back? Because we can petition said companies or we can turn to the state. And I don't know which is the best example, but how do you fight back?
Well, I understand what you're talking about with the moving line, because YouTube has definitely updated their terms of service over the time. And I'm not saying like, oh, just conform to the guidelines and everything will be fine and dandy. Like, sure, YouTube has its flaws, but I can tell you again from personal experience as a YouTuber with over 600,000 subscribers, I do my best to still convey and create edgy content while also pretty much, keeping it in line with roughly with YouTube's guidelines. And since I was deleted, pretty much all of my videos have been monetized, even manually confirmed suitable for ads. And I'm talking like political, anti-feminist, anything. I've had videos that you would not expect to be monetized that are running ads on there. So I do think that it matters if you do your best to follow the community guidelines. Kind of like what I said in my speech, I don't like a lot of the community guidelines. I especially don't like the guidelines on Twitter. I do think it's ridiculous that people get banned for misgendering or something. That's a little bit absurd. But the rules exist. And so, I mean, we could protest the rules, but I think that's probably a little bit of a different discussion.
So I just want to back up something you've said there. I've actually noticed that YouTube have been more liberal with what they're monetizing at the moment, because I've got a video coming out called "The Holocaust Has Been Me Too'd." You can see why I'm releasing this after this event, and that got monetized by YouTube. So I was like, "Oh, really? Okay." The thumbnail is "Victims Can Be Victimizers." So, look forward to that one. But that was monetized. So you're right. I think they are actually, I think they are being more, dare I say, liberal in that regard.
YouTube wants to monetize the most content they can.
Technically, yeah.
And I also, you said something that I would like to kind of jump off of earlier, where you talked about how there's other pressure on YouTube to sort of censor. I do think that that's an issue. So talking about big tech censorship, a lot of the times the discussion ends with people saying YouTube doesn't like conservatives, they're censoring conservatives. And that's when I would say that's not really the case, kind of like what I did in my speech. However, I do agree that YouTube is a slave to their advertisers as well as a slave to the mainstream media. So the adpocalypse, what it was called, when everyone got demonetized and everything, that happened because the mainstream media decided to attack YouTube because they didn't like that YouTube was platforming a larger media presence than a lot of mainstream media today. So they came out and started pressuring YouTube, which then resulted in the adpocalypse. So I do think that, again, I know I keep saying, oh, it's another discussion, but there is a good discussion to be had about outside pressure as far as mainstream media and advertisers sort of controlling YouTube and controlling what they want to do. Maybe we can have a discussion on mainstream media and advertiser censoring. Maybe that's a good discussion to have.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I think it's actually really good that you came out and produced a solid version of the counter argument, right? I think that's actually a really valuable thing, because what we've had here is both sides of the discussion. And I tell you, if this was a Democrat-run conference, you would have the discussion and then the more radical version of that argument being fed to you.
And a lot of people crying and screaming.
Yeah, exactly, and saying that you're not going far enough. So, but yeah, good job.
Just want to record it. So I have a question about probably the most serious form of censorship, and that is directed to both of you, although Sargon, you might be at a bit of a disadvantage. Who do you think will be, of the Clinton insiders, will be the next one to commit suicide?
I mean, I don't know about Clinton insiders, but honestly, I'm putting money on my girl Tulsi, man. I mean,
that's what I was gonna say.
I really hope she doesn't, because man, her Twitter game was immense. The queen of warmongers, personification of the rot. I mean, good God, Hillary's must have been fuming after that, you know. But yeah, no, I don't.
Hunter?
What he said.
Was that a serious question?
Great, thank you, gentlemen.
So I actually have two questions, one for you and one for Hunter. So the first one for Hunter is about like the wall and all that. So I feel like immigration is like one of the like a big problem in U.S. And I feel like liberals don't understand what money is and what economy is. So, all right, thank you. All right.
It's because they've never worked a day in their lives. That's
yeah.
why.
So, for example, like in California, I see I've been there before, and like San Francisco and like LA, they have a lot of poor people around, and it's too expensive to live there. And I see them have immigrants coming in illegally, and I'm like, if you can't support your own people itself, how can you support these people that are coming in illegally? So I feel like Trump as of now has done a good job, trying to slow it down. So my question is what more can he do to actually help the countries in which immigrants are coming from, to help the countries keep their people there so that they could better help their country itself.
Is that for me? Was that for me? Well, I think that the discussion about immigration is usually it's very one-sided. So it's either the leftist argument, which is open borders, let everyone just kind of walk into the country, who cares? And then a lot of the times we have people who are more, farther right that say no immigration, we don't want any immigration. I think we do need to find a good balance, and I think Trump has done a really good job at that. One thing that I do think needs to be talked about more by conservatives and liberals is that, yes, we do have a problem with illegal immigration. Yes, we do need to build the wall. Data has shown that places where, in a smaller scale, where there are walls, immigration or illegal immigration greatly decreases. But we also need to make the process to become a legal immigrant here easier. So right now, it's unfair that it's easier right now to cross the border illegally than it would be to ever become a US citizen. I think that's a problem, and those policies almost support illegal immigration without really intentionally doing that. So I don't think there's ever going to be a way to fully keep everyone in their own country, and I think that it's okay for immigrants to come here legally. I think that the best thing that we can do is kind of like what Trump has already been talking about as far as building the wall. But then I think we need to improve our immigration process and system to make it easier so that we can have more legal vetted immigrants welcomed into our country.
So the second question is, so I feel like the LGBTQ community, I feel like they put a lot of stress on themselves. For example, yesterday I was looking at I actually didn't know all the pronouns, for example. And I was like,
nobody knows all the pronouns, man.
A new one comes out like every minute.
Yeah, don't feel bad about it.
so for example, like they were using like day as a singular noun.
Day?
Day as a like a pronoun.
they, yeah.
And I was like, if I come up to somebody and say like day as a singular, that does not make sense anyway. So I feel like they just like puts like more stress on themselves, and like for example, like them saying that like there's more like there's more than one gender, even though like you go to a store and it's like a man and a guy, like men and women clothes. If you shop online as a men and women, like you put more stress on yourself saying that there is more than more than two genders when there is only two. So how do you think like they do or they don't put more or they don't put more stress on themselves?
Yeah, they're certainly not helping themselves out by inventing a bunch of pronouns, then demanding insult point that you use them. But there is actually a legitimate use for they as a gender neutral pronoun. If you don't actually know someone's gender, how are you going to refer to them? You've got to say they. They want this, they want that, not he or she, because you don't know what they are. You might not even know who you're talking about, right? But that goes away instantly as soon as you know the gender, the person that you're talking about, because you can identify the gender that they have. And that's what the leftist contention is. They're saying, well, look, you don't actually know my gender, therefore. But that's a really, really selfish way of looking at it, because they will use terms like gender as performative. And if gender's performative, well, who are you performing to? You're performing to the people around you. You want to look like a man, you want to look like a woman, so you know that men and women recognize you as what you are. And so the second that you can see someone, you can tell whether that's a man or a woman, or whether they're trying to be a man or a woman. So the idea of the gender neutral pronouns goes away instantly. So the fact that they're still demanding it, yeah, it's putting ridiculous pressure on themselves, but it's also putting pressure on you, because that's not normal. You're meant to be observing the world around you. It's weird to say, hey, look, I'm going to decide how you view me. That's a really selfish and entitled thing to do, because no one gets to do that. It's your perception, not theirs, So it's unbelievably entitled, and it's never going to work. It's never going to work.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Sargon, this is a question for you. A colleague of yours by the name of Kraut organized a deplatforming campaign against another YouTuber by the name of Rage After Storm. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
I don't care.
His actions, along with others, would ultimately lead Rage After Storm ultimately being run off the internet and losing her job. Although your initial public reaction was not positive about what he was doing, he would later go on a kill stream in November of last year when you were being questioned about your connections to Kraut.
My answer to
and
this
his
is I'm literally going to say
deplatforming
I
to other
don't
things
care.
that he was doing.
I literally don't care, man. I'm sorry.
You said
I'm not
I
answering
don't
internet
disavow
drama
Kraut
questions.
at all. In fact, I completely avow everything he's ever said or done. Can you explain why this is acceptable?
No. I'm sorry, man. This is pointless stuff. It's internet drama. I'm really sorry.
So my question is kind of based towards Hunter, but both of you can answer. So a lot of the things that you said while you were speaking, you claim that the big tech bias it wasn't censorship, it's just a bias. Where do you draw the line between where a bias ends and censorship begins? Because what you described was conservative ideas, like mainstream conservative ideas, were not visible to the public. But that's okay because there are some low-level leftist ideas that nobody in their right mind would support that are being pushed to the back as well. So where does the line get drawn between political bias and political censorship for these big tech companies?
Well, I think bias is more of a subtle thing. I think that bias exists, it'd be more likely to find bias, sort of like what we were talking about earlier, within search results, how data is presented to you when you search. I feel like that's more of what bias is. Censorship, it kind of goes along with the word. It's being terminated, deleted because of your political views. So that's really where maybe that's too harsh of a line to draw, but that's sort of where I would draw the line. Yeah.
So don't these serve the same purpose where the main goal is to keep the regular public from being able to view the content? Isn't that the basic purpose of censorship? And if bias is being used to keep people from viewing the content, isn't that serving the basic use of censorship, whether you define it as such or not?
It would be if the bias was actually doing that, where it's not. Like the data I mentioned, conservative pages on Facebook, conservative YouTube channels, they are outperforming all the leftist pages. So
that's actually not true on YouTube, though. On YouTube, the left.
maybe that might be a little bit of a sweeping claim.
No,
but
no, no.
For the most part, I mean, right wingers have a massive presence online, and they do tend to dominate most left-leaning pages.
I don't know. I mean, if you look at the YouTube channels of Vox compared to people like Steven Crowder, Vox have got 2 million more subscribers and billions of more views. Like
I mean, they're also a syndicated page that's been around long.
Sure, absolutely, but they get pushed to the top of the search rankings. You know, I mean, if I search Steven Crowder, I might not get his videos, but if I search Vox, I certainly get theirs. You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, I think that yes and no. I think that bias, like I said, can play a role in keeping ideas out of the public eye, but based on the data, it just does not seem that that's happening right now.
So just one more part to this. So considering that the majority of content that is actually discovered on a Google search is found on the first page, which, I mean, most of us probably assume this, but it's actually been proven, the majority of people do not go to the second page. If it's not on the first page, they don't search farther. So knowing the habits of the people and knowing that as long as they keep conservative content off that first page, their bias doesn't necessarily keep it off of their search engine completely, but it is removing it from the public eye and from the majority of the public eye.
But that's not happening. I would agree with you if that were happening. I mean, Breitbart, I know a few years ago, Breitbart, I think I don't quote me on this because I'd have to double check my sources, but I know for a fact that Breitbart at one point was actually getting more clicks than like porn sites, Pornhub or something. I remember someone told me about this, so I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, during the 2016 election, they were doing really well.
I mean, when I'm Googling and doing research for my videos, I see right-wing pages as well as left-wing pages coming up on the first page all the time. So I know that's anecdotal. I mean, the best I can tell you is what the Economist study found is that there really is no ideological bias in Google search results. The bias does exist though, where syndicated certified news sources are usually pushed to the top of search results, probably like on YouTube. But I would agree with your point, but it's not happening. So I can't agree with you.
I'm of the opinion that it's happening, to be honest. I've seen it more than enough times myself just using the search engines. I mean, just look at the autocomplete on Google. You couldn't get a more crystal clear case. Search Donald Trump and then see what comes up, and then search Hillary Clinton and see what comes up.
Well, there's also just a lot more negative articles about Trump.
Yeah, but it's not the articles that are the problem. We're talking just the auto-completion, because that drives traffic in and of itself. And so you won't find anything after a certain point with Hillary that you know is going to be there. Like Hillary Clinton emails doesn't auto-complete. This is happening, man. I'm absolutely.
But that's like it doesn't auto-complete when you're trying to type Hillary Clinton emails. Like that's the big tech's doing to keep all of us conservatives down.
This is why Robert Epstein was saying, look, we drove millions of votes to Hillary, and he's a Democrat. He's a personal friend of Hillary's, and he's saying it in congressional testimony. They are doing that, man.
I think that bias I think that bias can exist, and it does exist on social media platforms, but you'll have to give me more compelling evidence of censorship other than it doesn't auto-fill one search result for Hillary Clinton.
That's not just one. That's just an example.
What's that? All right, let's see some results. Let's see it happening.
It is. That's.
But where?
In the search results.
Where though? Like, tell me where.
Well, what we've just given you examples.
I'm giving examples.
What examples would you like? Like, what would you satisfy?
I'm giving examples of actual data based on studies that have been conducted that didn't find ideological bias in Google search results. And I'm sorry, but anecdotal evidence or an internal memo doesn't really hold up when you compare it to the data.
Yeah, but then you can just listen to them saying it. Like Tim Cook says it's their responsibility to promote social justice. He'll say it like he's a preacher at a pulpit, like this is an ideological goal. Like this is the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, these people have their own political beliefs, but
so we have the people at the top saying they want to do it. We've got the memos of them doing it. We've got people like James Damore get fired for simply saying that perhaps there is some sort of science behind the connection between biology and gender. And then you've got all of there's currently a conservative union in Facebook because they're constantly being.
Well, I do think that Facebook is a lot worse than Google and YouTube.
I think they're all as bad as one another at this point. I mean, it's constantly happening.
Not at all. No, we cannot say they're all as bad. I think Twitter, out of all of them, is the worst because Twitter. I mean, Twitter is ridiculous. All right, I think that if anywhere conservative bias exists, it's on Twitter, but not on YouTube. And it's not at all the same on YouTube when massive conservative channels are able to thrive. Look at how
I think YouTube is the best for it. You're right.
I do think YouTube is the
they're
best
the best option at the moment. But I don't think there's any doubt that, I mean, there's so much evidence out there that I'm surprised you're
I just
overlooking.
haven't really heard any evidence, and I've been able to give far more evidence on the contrary.
Okay.
Next question. I just appreciate it if the crowd participation just calm down. We want these guys to discuss the issues, and we don't need everybody giving their 2 cents. But if you have a question, the line is there. Thank you.
All right. Sargon, Hunter, thank you so much for coming to Penn State. My question for you, Sargon, has to do with a book that you recommended back in 2016. It was called Black Flags, The Rise of ISIS by Toby Warwick.
Yep.
And one of the things that Warwick went on to talk about was, the progress of Iraqi Kurdistan, the Kurds, what they've been doing in Syria. And fast forward 3 years now, what are your thoughts on the United States withdrawing troops from Kurdish territory?
I think the United States is in an unwinnable position, and you've really got to decide, are you the policeman of the world or not? Because if you're not, then that means you've got to stand by as these tyrannical regimes start doing whatever they want in the Middle East, or you have to accept responsibility for what they're doing and go in and prevent them. Personally, I think that the Kurds actually deserve their own state. There's 33 million Kurds in a fairly concentrated area in the Middle East, and it was the British, when they carved the place up, that didn't give any real heed and any sensitivity to the nature of the tribal conflicts there. It's undoubtedly a problem, and I mean, I think that they should be supported, but Trump ran on the idea of getting out of the Middle East. What's he going to do? Not fulfill the promise? So it's a real no-win situation, and you guys have got to decide. It's your country.
But also, when you look at a place like Iraq, too, when Mosul fell to the Islamic State, we helped the Iraqi government build back up to take back Mosul. And I feel like, could that work the same way with the Kurds if we were to just let them keep that territory? It's more of, would you rather have the Assad regime, a regime that literally bombs their own people with a nerve gas to keep that territory?
I'm not sure that's actually been proven, frankly, but I mean, like I said, I personally think they should have their own state, but that's an unbelievably complex diplomatic question. Because, I mean, what you're suggesting is breaking off territory from Russian allies. I mean, Russia's surely going to have something to say about that, So it's, and Turkey as well, man. I don't know if the United States has the authority to start carving off territory from NATO allies. So it's an insanely complicated question, man. I mean, like I said, I personally would like them to have their own state, but it would take decades and huge amounts of diplomatic action to get to that point. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Okay, so my first question is more for clarification, if anything else. Do you think that censorship should be banned completely from every platform?
Censorship.
Oh, is that what I said? Censorship should be banned completely from every platform.
I don't know if there is such a thing as banning censorship, but I think that, I mean, unironically, I have to say that Mark Zuckerberg's right. We should be definitely looking towards trending towards free expression, which is something he said, which I'm genuinely surprised at, because it's the total opposite of something like Tim Cook or the Google executives were saying after Trump was elected. So, but yes, I think that we need far less censorship and more free speech.
And then have you also both of you guys are saying that you've been censored, you feel silenced and stuff like that. But have you guys ever reflected on what it is you're saying and why it's being banned or censored? If you're offending people with anti-gay, anti-feminist, or whatever you guys are saying on your videos that I can't see anymore, have you ever thought about why that's happening? And that aside from political views.
I don't think offense is a good enough reason to censor someone.
that can also promote, like that can also lead to violence. Because if you say something on your channel that offends someone, then it goes back and forth in the comments and then it can turn violent really quickly.
But the person who commits violence is not my responsibility, it's their responsibility.
That's what I was going to say.
But if it's a reaction to what you're saying, like I feel like
Yeah, but what you're suggesting is they're automatons. They're not people with agency and responsibility of their own. I have a right to say what I like, and I don't incite violence, so I don't get deplatformed. So if anyone does anything from that point onwards, that's their responsibility. It's not my responsibility. They have agency and they have action, and I don't think it's right to take that away from them.
Okay.
Hi, I don't really know either of you, but I came because I was interested in seeing what you guys were talking about. My question is actually for Hunter. So I noticed that in your video, your introduction video, you had said something. There was like a gray mask with a watermelon. And you kind of like, it's not what it looks like. Or you had said that, you know, you had helped the LGBT community more than whoever the other girl was or something like that. And that you like tell the truth about Black people. So I wanted to know, because I don't know those videos, what it is that you were actually talking about in the videos, or like how you feel like you've actually helped the LGBTQ community, or like what that truth was that you were saying about Black people.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my content is, so someone else earlier was talking about edgy humor and edgy content. I also really like edgy content. So I usually like to present my ideas with like an edgier skit at the beginning. So that video, The Truth About Black People, I titled it that because I knew it would be inflammatory, and I knew that people would really be shocked and kind of have to click on it to see what it's all about. But when you actually get into the meat of the video, I was actually debunking some pretty common race realist myths that are peddled by like alt-right people who basically argue that low IQs in Black people is due to race and genetics. Very controversial and very kind of like defunct science, to be honest. So that's actually what that video was. It was actually going after the people who are against Black people, but I presented in a way that still kind of takes that inflammatory approach, because that's kind of how my brand
It's
is.
fun, that's why.
It is fun.
It's fun to push boundaries. But these are the same reasons that I've been banned from Patreon and Twitter. Like I was going after the Nazis, but using words that were naughty. And because it's funny, come on.
It is fun.
Yeah, because yeah, I guess a lot of things are funny, but I guess I feel like you guys were joking about lynching and stuff like that was also funny in the crowd and stuff.
Who was joking about
But
lynching?
that being said, you know, you guys, I feel like you guys are just kind of using the word lynching and be like, ah, ha, 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 it's a
But
joke.
why can't that be
But-
funny? Why can't that be funny?
Because you can't understand it because you're not Black. But that's not my question. That's not my question.
Hang on.
That's not my
Don't
question.
give me a
That's not
racial.
my question.
Don't
That's not my
incite your
question.
racial privilege to me.
My racial
right?
privilege?
Black people are not the only people who have been lynched.
I'm American,
Yeah, and I'm English.
right? So
Okay.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't give me that, right? Do you know how many peasants in England got lynched? No, you do not.
So then why would you be laughing about it?
Because I don't want it to have power over my life.
I guess.
It's just words.
Who was joking about lynching, though?
I don't know.
Just
I
out
don't
of
actually think we
curiosity.
were. But in principle, let's assume we were. You know, why do you want someone else's words to control your life?
I mean, Joe, like we're not getting, like, if you sat down and watched like The Office, they have like racist jokes in that every now and then. Like, no one's complaining about that. I feel like jokes are. I've said this about LGBT people as well, and I mean,
Oh yeah, just
Any
the other LGBTQ question too.
I'll get to that too. Don't worry. But I think that trying to protect any minority group from jokes is the opposite of equality. So LGBT people the LGBT community wants to be treated as equals. So I will make fun of the LGBT community just like I'll make fun of white people, Black people, Asian people, and everyone else.
Totally agree.
So that's what equality is. Equality means being treated like an equal member of society. And our society makes jokes about people. Our society makes jokes at people's
You
expense.
see that guy with the Sargon pillow over there? Man, I am going to rip him when we get out of this. Like, he's not going to be left alone because he's white. You know what I mean? And the thing is, if I wouldn't do something like that too, if I wouldn't like have joke with you, then I would be saying, look, you're actually not valid. You know, because what I'm saying is what he is valid. I would be treating you different on account of your race. treating you as inferiors if you can't take a joke like he can take a joke. And I think that's wrong, man.
I don't think that'd be appropriate. I think
Yeah,
that would be racist.
I think that's racist. You know, because like one of the things you got to understand is that what we're talking about here is something in England we call banter, right? It's it's ribbing. It's a way, incidentally, of validating what the thing is, because you can't have the joke without the existence of the thing. And so you need that thing to exist if you want to share a joke. And the joke goes backwards, it goes back and forth. You've got banter either way. This is how, after literally 1,000 years of the English, the Irish, the Scots, and the Welsh living next to each other, right, after 1,000 years, we don't have violence anymore. We don't have ethnic violence. There used to be, like all through the Middle Ages, you get the Scots coming down and taking slaves, English slaves, back to Scotland. And then you'd have to raise up a giant army of English peasants armed with pitchforks to go fight off these kilt-wearing haggis eaters, right? But then they'll say something and they'll be like, oh my God, that's ethnic humor against the Scots. And then they'll say something back against the English. And then the Welsh will get involved and we'll have to say, shut up or we'll enslave you again. Like it's all a bunch of banter, and it validates the existence of these people, because without that, who am I insulting?
Right. Okay, that's a good answer. Oh,
Thank you.
In answer, I think I'm forgetting who your viewers are, and that I'm not your viewers. You know what I'm saying?
That's okay. You could be.
No. That's why I think that's why I'm not understanding.
No.
That's why I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
no.
understanding you. But okay, thank you for your answer.
But that's the point, isn't it? Like, it's not out of hatred that jokes come,
It's just that I don't think it's funny, so I wouldn't watch.
Well, that's okay, yeah.
But that's why.
That's
we're
the
at odds.
but that's freedom, isn't it? You don't have to watch.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. So I think we all know that the vote is the means of representing, the average person in the democratic process. And, if people didn't have a vote in the democratic process, they would probably represent themselves through more violent means.
What other way is there?
Yeah. But what happens when money isn't represented in a government? Because I've noticed that when money isn't formally represented in a government, there's bribery, or I guess political donations. You also have much more violent cases where they'll just hire mercenaries to take over the government, or they'll pull a coup like with Pinochet. So do you think, like, in light of things like Brexit, where you see the process being held up by oligarchs who have money to spend, do you think we need to actually represent money in our governments before they decide to go postal with it?
I don't think money has ever not been represented in governments. That's honestly a lot of the point of being at the top is to gain wealth, and wealth naturally accumulates there. And I don't think it can be separated, to be honest.
Oh yeah, sure. Why not? Hunter, I noticed something in your intro video that you said that not vaccinating your children is child abuse. Now, I feel like there's an implication with that statement that for parents who don't vaccinate their children, you'd be willing to Waco them.
Willing to what? That's not the implication I was making.
I'm exaggerating. I'm just
Maybe you should extract it a bit more so Hunter can
Can we
follow
censor
you.
this guy? I'm sorry.
Well, I just feel like when you're saying that it's child abuse, you sort of want to take away their kids. And I mean, maybe it's through a peaceful process. You go to their house and politely ask, hey, may I have your kids? You're not vaccinating them with this drug, so may we please either have them vaccinated or take them away from you? I feel like that would get a very bad reaction. It's just hypothetical.
Can't he just think that that's really stupid and these people are
Yeah,
bad?
I mean, that's kind of where it ends there. It was meant to be an inflammatory statement. However, I do think that parents who refuse to vaccinate their children, that is child abuse. Because I mean, look at the data. A lot of these anti-vaxxer myths are complete BS. I actually recently did a video on anti-vaxxers and successfully managed to trigger a bunch of conservatives actually who follow me because they could not believe I would be pro-vaccine. Even though if you look at the data, you know, if you read through the anti-vaxxers' claims, most, if not all of them, are completely ridiculous and not founded on any real data. There you go. We can hang out then. No polio for you.
Oh, no. Okay, so bear with me here. This is kind of a long one, but I, like you, like to express my beliefs using humor, and when I try to insult people I disagree with in a polite way, I usually like to combine the humor of Blazing Saddles or Married with Children. And that's usually where I like to base my jokes. So my problem for me as a student, and if I make law review next year, because I'll be a second-year law student next year, I want to write an article about this. Freedom of speech and freedom from consequences. How much of the former, or how much of the latter do you meaningfully need for the former to be meaningful? And I say this because as a conservative student, I often feel like the repercussions I would face for expressing my beliefs would be such that my professors would look at me in a biased way, possibly cut down my grades, maybe give me bad recommendations, or my employers might hear that I'm conservative and they might judge me negatively for that. So in effect, my mom says, take all of those known consequences or possible consequences and basically have like a gag rule on yourself to have your beliefs but never express them. And she's so serious about this, I had to lie to her about about where I am right now. I told her I was just at a Federalist Society meeting, but not that I was meeting with you two.
Honestly, it may as well be, though. I mean, let's be honest. But so there's the purpose behind freedom of speech is to prevent legal consequences, fundamentally. But there is a very strong argument to say that, look, the more social consequences that begin to accrue, the more difficult society becomes to live in, and the more intolerant it becomes. I mean, the whole, like 90% of On Liberty by John Stuart Mill is not arguing against government censorship. It's arguing against social censorship, as in the censure of the other people in society, saying, well, look, you know, if we can't speak, even if the government isn't the one arresting me, if I can't get a job, if I can't get a house, if I can't have a bank account or whatever it is, you know, then I'm still not free. But you can say, well, there's a reasonable line that's going to have to be drawn there. And the question is, where do we draw it? Now, I'm of the opinion that we draw it quite far out to the free speech zone, but I appreciate that that's never going to be a perfect solution. But it's a conversation that we have to have. And the only problem, though, is it requires some sort of good faith dialogue on the part of the people who are going to be offended by this. And if you've got a communist professor, don't expect much good faith. So it really is down to your personal position in your life and your context. But ideally, I think that we should have more personal freedom in that regard. But there's not really a lot we can do other than have it being a kind of zeitgeist that infests an area, that occupies an area, and that, you know, that is the kind of general theme by which we live.
Okay, and this is a specific question for Hunter. It's okay, I can talk loud enough that he can hear me. When are we gonna have more episodes and more experiences of the dad and Ben's son? You did one episode about it as like a teaser, and then I was expecting more. Are there gonna be any more episodes of dad and Ben's son?
There will be more. Don't worry, there will be more. I assure you guys, there will be more.
And this is the last one, so.
All right, Carl and Hunter, welcome to Penn State. My question is actually directly to you, Hunter. You're here on stage on a platform with Carl Benjamin. Are you aware of comments that Carl Benjamin made about a British member of Parliament and raping
I
her?
am somewhat aware, but I also think that the comments were greatly taken out of context.
You can disavow if you like.
And I know that what you were getting at was like a self-aware joke. However, I'm also able to see why a lot of, you know, cuckoo little lefties might get a little triggered by what he said.
Honestly, that was entirely the point.
Don't you think that's absolutely disgusting, and you should just completely disavow and not associate yourself with this man?
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't
sure.
know, I don't know how you feel comfortable being on stage with this guy. Yeah,
Disavow.
yeah. What about
Sure,
this?
I did.
Just cut your losses, disavow.
Right.
I disavow,
mean,
you know.
What about the pedophile comments?
What about which one?
The pedophile comments and the age of consent should be
So
up
are you
to
gonna
each
ask me to
child.
disavow every like individual
No,
comment
but,
Sargon's made that you don't like?
The thing is, he doesn't know what I said, right? So he doesn't
What
know.
did you actually say? Do you want to?
So I was talking to a victim of pedophilia, right?
asking what Hunter.
Yeah, I know.
But I haven't
But he's
really-
asking me a question, and I'm not answering your question, buddy. I'm not answering. He's just asked me a question. He's asked me a question. And he wants an answer.
I wanted to know what his comments were in full, so that I can decide to disavow them or not. For you.
So I was sprung with the surprise that I was talking to a victim of pedophilia back in 2014. I didn't really know what to do. And I didn't really want to tell them that, look, I think you're the victim, because a lot of these people, and Milo's the same actually, they think that they're the ones who initiate it, right? And it's very difficult because you realize that a lot of their own emotional sort of ego is built on the idea that, no, and just like you, I'm not a victim, right? I'm not a victim. And so they sit there and go, well, I've got all of these justifications for why I'm not a victim. And when that's sprung on you, you think, well, Christ, what can I do? You know, what am I going to do? Am I going to make this guy break down in tears? You know, and so I gave the most charitable response I could. It's like, well, you know, there have been civilizations that have had relationships, like ancient Greeks, things like this. And eventually I changed the subject as quickly as possible. I think that's what he's talking about. But I was on the other side of that, because what you're ignoring is that at minute 19 of that stream, I said that the age of consent should be 16. Why are you leaving that out?
Why you what?
Why are you leaving that out? Because you didn't know, did you? You didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't know. Just admit you didn't know.
Dude, no, you're.
Just admit you didn't know.
What you're doing is you're trying to ask me a question to get at Sargon. Listen, I don't know the full context to the past comments Sargon's made. We happen to be in a similar genre of content that we create on YouTube together. If you have a question for me specifically, I'd be happy to answer it, but I'm not going to sit here and answer questions about other people sitting next to me when you could just be asking Sargon these questions.
But you didn't know, did you? Because it's easier to fool a man. It's easier to fool a man than to persuade him that he has been fooled. You have been fooled, sir. See? Look here.
Hold on, wait. I think he just beat us in the argument because he rolled his eyes.
Yeah, go ahead, man. I'd be happily to stand here all night, or sit here all night, you know.
I just want to say, Hunter, I've been a big fan for years now, and I want to thank you personally for red pilling me.
There you go.
Keep fighting. You're making a difference. So I wanted to ask about something that I believe affects the majority of students in this room, which is academic censorship. It was touched on before, and it'll be especially relevant when I start my 10-page paper that I probably should have started about a week ago. But as a conservative, and there have been studies done that have shown that conservatives who express their viewpoints in their assignments tend to receive lower grades. I was wondering if you had any advice or any opinions you'd like to share on that topic, and anything that might be able to help me out.
Sure. Well, what I would say is you're absolutely correct. There is certainly an issue with conservative censorship on college campuses. I also know there was another study that found, I think it was 98% of professors leaned left. It was majority of the professors on college campuses lean left. So you're absolutely correct in the notion that academic conservative censorship exists. What I would recommend you do is never shut up. That would be my first tip, is never shut up, because the left, they use these tactics like the lower grades and the intimidation to try and get you to shut up. So if you shut up, then you've essentially validated their tactics to censor you. So and when I say, don't shut up, I'm not saying run around spouting everywhere, oh, I like Trump, Trump's the best or whatever, but do so respectfully.
Well, then maybe.
And don't let yourself be intimidated by the leftist tactics, because if you, along with other conservative students, refuse to be intimidated by these tactics, then I think that you will begin to sort of turn that around a little bit.
So one of the best examples of what you're talking about is a professor called Peter Boghossian. He's a professor of philosophy at Portland. You can imagine how he gets treated when he says, wait a minute, social justice is cancer. This is really bad stuff. And it's gonna, and it's the way that Douglas Murray puts it, it's an entirely new metaphysic. It's a new way of viewing what is right and wrong. And he has been systematically ground out of the political, of the academic process, to the point where when I went to speak at Portland, his office had been moved for suspicious reasons. I can't remember what the exact reason was. Oh, sorry, there's a leak in your office. Yeah, no, exactly. Not quite that bad, but I mean, yeah, it'd be, oh, well, the paperwork says, this rule says there's a leak here, you've got, and so basically his office had been moved to a storage room in the basement in Portland. And I was just like, is this your office? He was like, yeah, they're screwing me. And it's like, it happens, man. It absolutely happens. And they're very litigious. They're very legalistic. They'll use every excuse and every rule that they can to effectively box you in and get rid of you.
Thank you. One more.
I was at the Straight Pride Parade along with those clowns. So
I'm definitely going to try and attend next year, man. I tell you.
Yeah. So I ended up in the pictures in several newspapers, and a lot of my friends, my family, and people at work, they all congratulated me, and they supported that I was actually in the newspaper. But there were 3 friends that I have who said things like, I should end up losing my job for being there. They said I'm a Nazi. They said I should have no friends, and other more serious things. Essentially, what they were advocating was something like total social ostracization. So wouldn't that be a scary concept that anyone who wears a Trump hat, waves an American flag, or goes to the Straight Pride Parade is called a Nazi and is totally ostracized from society? That's a little bit more serious than what the other person said earlier about her grades in class, just because of her beliefs. And what do you think of all that?
I think it's very compassionate to advocate ostracization. It's honestly the worst thing you can do to a human being, and they know it. That's why they advocate it. Failing short of actual violence to a person, ostracizing someone is the most hideous thing you can do. This is one of the reasons why censorship, especially online censorship, is so bad. People are wondering, why are people like Milo getting so radical? Well, why do you think? He's been effectively kicked out of society because he's a jokester on the internet. And it really is the sort of thing that is making the alt-right turn into shooters. There have been 3 mass shootings from the alt-right now against Muslims and Jews, and I think these are probably going to continue. That's not an endorsement. That's a sad prediction, because these people are just being sliced off of social media platforms. I mean, Red Ice TV was taken down the other day. I've got no love for Red Ice TV, but I don't think they actually broke the rules. I'm aware from various people that I've spoken to that they actually go out of their way to do exactly what you say and stay very much within the narrow confines that the terms of service say. But it didn't matter. They got removed. This is what's driving them to violence, because when you don't have speech, you've only got one other option. But I tell you what, the Straight Pride Parade is the best troll that I've ever seen.
It was an excellent troll.
And but the scope of it is incredible, because the page is Super Happy Fun America. It's only like 5,000 followers, right? But celebrities, politicians, mega corporations are like, this Straight Pride Parade's wrong. Why are you even giving it the time of day? I mean, the guy's dressed in the clown suit. He's got a Sargon pillow. Like, why are you the enemy to them, So there must have been something to it. And I agree. I side with the oppressed majority in this regard. The poor straight people, we just can't catch a break. We need Straight Pride Month. That's what we need.
There you go.